product development and knowing about open source in large organizations, if you were the king of an organization or the an organization, what would the corporate strategy around open source be that you would put in place?
I the number of reasons for working with open source. So maybe if you allow me, I'll try to go into the various reasons because it's maybe a too general question. One obvious reason would be in product development that you're reusing quality code directly from open source contributions. And you could sort of put in place a strategy where you say, okay, on which areas do we use what open source? And how sensitive are we in different areas? And the areas where you're not that sensitive, go ahead and try to use it much more than you do. So you really have to think about that. You cannot make that a common decision all over the organization, because in some cases it's too toxic and you shouldn't use open source. But you could have a team of people going through all the areas and say, here is less sensitive. You put technical, legal people together, and you could see where you dare to use it, because of the productivity and saving money. And then you could use code as a bait, that you get the industry to move in a different direction. If you don't like the way that things are moving and operators are asking for, you can put out the code and you can offer the customers to try it out. And others using your contribution makes it even more sticky. So that's a way of and you can point that you could do that as a strategic thing, also depending on the situation and where in the network. Then when it comes to comes to security, there's been a lot of discussion around open source and security aspects and so on. You could argue that open source can be seen by anyone, and it can be scrutinized by the community. So actually, from a security point of view, it's probably better to have open source code than having closed code, because it's open, it's transparent. And I don't know why open source has got a bad name when it comes to security. I should think it's the other way around. But you can argue about that.
Well, I think it's interesting, that one, because it's transparent and because researchers can analyze it and create bug reports and vulnerability reports against source. Those are all good things, right? And the fact that you want to identify the vulnerabilities, and then you want to be able to fix them, right? And the vast, many projects actually do those fixes. But because they're known, it does mean that anybody using that open source do stay current with their version, right? And that's a management topic that is only recently become, I think, really well identified and quantified. And things like the Cyber Resilience Act are making them very explicit with regard to what expectations are from at least the EU government as to how long those vulnerabilities can be around. So there's now, and this is just a level of exposure that didn't exist.
Sure. Yeah. There are really bad examples of open source that has been vulnerable and got a lot of press.
Fixed in the open source ecosystem very quickly. It's just big to propagate to everybody who's used it. Yeah.
And then another reason to contribute, you could contribute seed code. I mean, you can stimulate the industry to become active in an area where you have business interest, to identify where you want to go. And I mean, if you want to go into a new area where you haven't been before and make a mark, you can sort of throw out that seed code and then enhance that area. Then there is also, I mean, you could look at more cases where you influence standards with open source. And we have done that, and I mentioned before that I'm rather proud of being sort of the pushing through this reference from 3GPP SA5 on referencing the ONAP thse, which is the only reference I see towards open source. But I mean, I can see a big value in open source as a standard, because sometimes standard specifications are very hard to write, and they can be interpreted in very many ways. So to get away from that, why not use the exact same code as a standard set? And I think you could identify areas where that makes sense. For instance, in O&M. And then when it comes to software efficiency, I mean, using the same code all over the industry and even within the company, because you have different codes in different parts of the company, that helps, that it's sort of as an efficiency enabler. And then I think also that you should recognize the software craftsmanship within a company. And it's very often hidden. So the good designers, the people that I admire enormously, that they're really really good, and they're engaged, and they even do open software sometimes code on their spare time to help in communities where they live, or in schools, or whatever. So they should be sort of seen, and they're rarely seen from the outside, and they should be recognized more. So to demonstrate competence and quality at the engineering level is I think important, and that you could do by open source. I mean, some of the open source projects have people that are very well known and respected also outside, and most of the people within a vendor is anonymous to the outside world. Then I think also business intelligence is important, because you can actually get access to early ideas from your competitors. You have to give a little to get something. You also get a sense of what the operators think earlier on, and they can share with you your experience. You can test out new ideas, and you can see if it catches on before it comes into the product. And then there is the recruitment part. I mean, you can retain or recruit different people, skill sets that you need. And I actually talked to an AT&T manager at one point, and I said, "Why are you engaged in open source?" And he said, "From our point of view, it's like we want to get talent. Nobody with talent would ever. They don't want to go to Gray AT&T or Deep Blue or whatever they are going to startups. They're going to other sort of Google and Alphabet and whatever, and it's very hard to recruit people to AT&T. So if we can come up with sort of a open source, so they can be seen as active in certain sort of communities outside of the company, that will make us be able to recruit more people with talent."
Yeah, I was just a couple of weeks ago, and I was amazed to see several different large banks and a couple of other large manufacturing organizations that don't really specify, they don't really do open source, other than the fact that they're so heavily reliant upon it. They want to hire people, right? And the only thing they were doing there was just the ability to talk to people. Come work with us, because we're doing fun things with this open source technologies.
And this AT&T manager, he was sort of, I tell people what we do here is secret. No, they said, I want to tell my friends and others what I'm doing. We want to share ideas, and I want to show in social media what I'm doing. No, it's secret. You can't do that. And that's a big sort of generation clash there, on sort of that you're an individual. You're not part of the gray army inside a company. And so he was sort of struggling with that.